Barbados, the country in the Western Hemisphere with the largest fleet of electric vehicles in its provision of public transportation. But that's not all. Public service vehicles, or PSVs, being operated by private interests are also on a push to help Barbados transition to 100% renewable energy in the next 5 years. Last year, government allocated $3 million to the private public service vehicle sector to assist with the transition from buses powered by fossil fuels to those using renewable energy. Earlier this year, the Alliance Owners of Public Transport launched its Transport Energy Project, taking advantage of government funding and committing to helping the island to achieve its renewable energy goals. Tonight, we're discussing the plans and progress of the private PSV providers to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And with me are Mr. Raphael, Chairman of the Alliance Owners of Public Transport, and Attorney at Law Craig Banfield, Director of Complaints of the Alliance Owners of Public Transport, as well as Mr. Kelvin Scott, Director of the Transport Energy Project. Gentlemen, welcome. We'll get into the discussion as soon as we get back from a short commercial break. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we have representatives from the public service vehicle sector, and we're discussing the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And first of all, Chairman, I would like to ask you, what does it mean that government has allocated $3 million for your sector to transition from using vehicles that are powered by fossil fuels to those that will utilize renewable energy, and how will these funds be accessed?
Okay, thank you for the question. Some 2.5 years ago, the government would have made available $3 million to the private sector for us to transition our vehicles from fossil fuel to electric, or what we call renewable energy. And as you well aware that we have over 800 public service vehicles, ZRs and minibuses on tap. And we spend over $50 million a year in fossil fuel at the rate of $250 a day in diesel. And we felt that to join the energy project, it was important that we as an association and we as a group that consume large amount of diesel, that we felt that we should form a transport energy project which is directed by Kelvin Scott, and to encourage persons to move from the fossil fuel into renewable energy.
What are the conditions for accessing the funds that government has made available?
Presently, we are looking at two stages of the funding or the program. The first stage will look at basically identifying 15 persons in the TAP program. And after that, then we will open the funding to other persons as well.
Okay. And TAP meaning transportation?
The Transport Augmentation Program, right? TAP. That's the ones that are into the Transport Board.
Okay, great.
So we have identified them because a lot of the buses that enter the TAP program are what we call 14-seaters. I know we have 14-seaters as well in our private service sector as well. But we have identified them because one, we are basically working on a pilot project, but I want to give the assurance to the other operators in the second stage phase of the program, they will be included.
Okay. Mr. Kelvin Scott, you are the director of this new transport energy project. How is it going so far? Tell me about the various stages and how the operators of the vehicles will benefit as they serve commuters.
Well, we are still in the embryonic stages, obviously because the money has not been disbursed as yet. But we have somewhat 2 years of research thus far on various types of renewable energy. So even though tonight we may be speaking a bit on the electric vehicles, which is the first phase, we have done extensive research, for example, in Trinidad as it relates to different forms of fossil fuel savings.
Tell me about the other phases that are to come after this electric phase, meaning the first phase will be focused on acquiring electric vehicles. Am I correct?
Yes, and then the second phase would be any type of vehicle that will lend to fossil fuel savings. So for example, we know of the hybrid vehicles that are popular here now. And when we're talking about hybrid, we're not just talking about the electric fossil fuel combination, but obviously we've looked into compressed natural gas. We've done some research in Trinidad, and currently we are working with Dr. Yui as it relates to sargassum and various forms of fossil fuel savings. Some that we wouldn't speak about right now.
Why are you keeping it a secret? What have you uncovered in Trinidad, and how can the sargassum seaweed help?
Well, first to answer your question about secret, we've basically signed a few memorandums of understanding as it relates to confidentiality. But what I can say is that we would have done some interviews in Trinidad as it relates to the compressed natural gas. We would have toured various facilities down there. We would have spoken to taxi drivers. We met with the individual who have public service vehicles like the ZRs and the 14-seaters, the 24-seaters, etc. down there. We would have looked at how they would have built the system using compressed natural gas and the savings that would have been derived as such.
Okay. Now I understand that the Transport Energy Project is not only targeting minibuses and ZRs. Tell me about the full class of public service vehicles that will be able to benefit from this project.
Well, we have just around 10,000 permits in all. And even though
permits for what?
Public service vehicles. So even though a small section, maybe just close to 1,000, would be designated to the 14-seaters, ZRs, and stuff like that, we still have limousines, we have taxis, we have car rentals. All of these would fall under the public service vehicles.
Okay. Now, you said the first phase is going to be focused on acquiring electric vehicles. What inroads have you made so far in terms of where you're going to source these vehicles from, how much they're going to cost to put on the roads to service our commuters?
Well, we have made contact with some manufacturers in Japan. Currently, we have one of our operators who had his bus now going 5 years, and we are kind of earmarking that particular manufacturer perhaps as the most feasible right now financially. And we're kind of using his vehicle as a proof of concept because for the last 5 years he has had tremendous success in terms of savings, etc. But we are not necessarily locking into one manufacturer as we have spoken to several, even locally, as it relates to building buses that would facilitate this transition.
Okay, before we go on to what can be done here locally, I know you, Chairman, Mr. Roy Raphael, you said that 15 PSVs have so far been earmarked to start this project, and they are the ones working in the TAP program. But besides those 15 already earmarked, how many do you believe are actually ready to begin this transition?
You talk about the first or the second phase?
The first phase?
The first phase.
Yes.
Well, the first phase, we are looking at 15 vehicles where we'll earmark about 12 ZRs and about 3 city-style bus, similarly to the transport board. Because the first phase basically will be a pilot project where we were actually able to bring these buses in and people were able to experience them and to drive with them and to give us their feedback. Because obviously the 13 ZRs that we're bringing are coaster style, while the other 3 that we're bringing is what I call city buses. And the city buses basically were geared toward the disabled community, which I will allow Mr. Banfield to speak to, because he has special responsibility for the disabled community. But we're hoping that with the terms and conditions of the loan, in which we're hoping that after government has finalized it, we will expect that the loan will, the minimum will be up to $200,000, right? It could probably be more on the enterprise growth fund, but with the fund access, the limitation is up to 200,000. We're working around that so that we can get as many buses out of that. So, and then you got 10 years to pay back. We have, I think it's 4% per annum. So the terms and conditions is very good, and I personally have to thank the government on this because it gives the opportunity for persons to move from actual fossil fuel to electric. And the benefit of the public will see those operators working longer hours, because obviously a lot of our operators who start to work at 5 o'clock finishes at 5 because the cost of diesel. So we're hoping to see those operators that are going to be coming on board. We should see them working longer period or longer hours, and there should be some benefit to the commuters.
I just want adding from what Mr. Raphael is busy discussing. Barbadians are very scared when it comes to transition. I remember back in, you remember exactly the date when we only had gasoline vehicles, and then it was pushed to diesel. I know the diesel now is being pushed out to electric and other forms of not fossil fuel, but more energy saving vehicles. The problem here is that we have more than 15 persons that are actually interested in transitioning. But of course, we can't transition all at this particular point in time. I think a lot of it have to do with them being a little bit more comfortable, and also the expense of the vehicles. They're not a cheap venture, and so therefore a lot of people are very hesitant. Some of them want to watch to see what's going on first. And from there then, it'll probably be more easier to make that change or that move into more energy vehicles going forward.
Okay. We're going to take a break and come right back with more of The People's Business. And welcome back to the People's Business. Mr. Roy Raphael, I want to come back to you and ask you about the money. You said earlier that each PSV operator can borrow up to $200,000 out of the $3 million fund under Fund Access. Now, clearly that is not adequate to service the number of people in this sector. What other opportunities are there for funding to make this energy transition?
Right, so we're saying the $3 million at $200,000 will be for those persons we have identified in the first phase of the project that we'll be working with through the TAP program. But any person in the second phase of the program going forward, any person who wants to have access to more than $200,000, I believe they can go to the Enterprise Growth Fund, which will probably provide more than $200,000.
Okay, on that note, we're going to take a call. We have a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead. Good evening.
Yes, hi, great evening. How are you doing?
We're doing well. Hi.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. I have a couple of questions for the panel. Is there a panel? My first question is, and that is the production team for taking my call. What is going to be done for the compensation of the travelers or the people who are being transported for when you are basically leaving people without transport when the buses break down? My final question is, what is going to be done in terms of implementing transport cafes for the refueling of the vehicles on the go in terms of the fact that this particular aspect of the vehicles are going to be differently with having to do refuel because they're electric instead of being diesel and they differ rather than no as to what that difference. Thank you very much.
Now we're talking about electric vehicles here, and we're also speaking to the fact that we are doing a pilot project. And pilot means that we're able to deal with any issues that comes up in the first phase, so that in the second phase we can already have these issues dealt with. Now, all of those persons who acquire the bus from one of our providers will be provided with a charging port. And we are in discussions with a company in Bridgetown that will also assist us in charging those buses. And I was made to understand only last week that they have fast charges that will take about 15 minutes to charge up. So I don't see any issues relating to the charges in terms of what we may have to do in the second phase is that we may have to have negotiations with other persons, like persons who work in the Spikestown and those operators working into our extension, so that we make sure that we provide charging ports for them. But happy to say that the battery life on those vehicles are 8 years. They are given 10 years to pay back your loan, and they're given fast charges. So we're very much looking forward, as I said, to having the first set of 15 buses here. Hopefully by the end of this year, we shall have the first number of them. As Mr. Scott said earlier, that we are still in discussion with providers. We are also prepared a team to go off to China very shortly to also explore and to have discussion with other persons as well. Because obviously we have 800 vehicles to transition, an additional 9,000 to do so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that we are trying not to be too concise in how we come about and getting this operation going. So I think our providers that we are looking at are from a numerous amount of different sort of areas. And so we're trying to do the best fit for Barbados and trying to make sure that we can bring the cost down, and the service that we provided to the customer will be exceptional based upon our conditions here.
Mr. Banfield, you are responsible for complaints at the Alliance Owner Public Transport.
Yes, ma'am.
You also have a responsibility for the disabled community.
Correct.
You're going to be transitioning to more fuel-efficient buses using renewable energy sources. How will you now be catering to the disabled community as you make that transition?
Yeah, we are going to be putting things in place in terms of more features on the buses that will be coming down. For example, just like how the Transport Board, I believe, does with how the buses would kneel to the curb. We're going to have systems in place in the vehicles that will be able to actually speak the stop as you're approaching the next approaching bus stop. It will actually have voice enhancement whereby you'll be able to note the next stop. We're also looking for safety features inside the buses that will assist the disability, because let's face it, disability community, one of the things that they lack is independence when it comes to employment opportunities, social participation in terms of actually getting out there and socializing with people when they want to. And so therefore, we are trying to make them more independent, and we believe that all sectors of Barbados, whether you're disabled or not, should have access to transportation and be able to get where and whenever you want at any available time, and without having the difficulties that we have right now in Barbados, where is lack of transportation for the disabled community. And we're very passionate about trying to make sure that everybody is on board, and we all meet the needs of every customer, commuter going forward next century.
Mr. Kelvin Scott, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so we've spoken to the manufacturers as it relates to retrofitting the first phase of the buses, or at least the second phase, that would definitely be able to be equipped enough for the disabled community. We've had several talks with the disabled community in an effort to garner exactly the specifications that they would want to make them comfortable. And we spoke to the manufacturers, and they have agreed that they're willing to make the necessary adjustments to their units in order to make this disabled community as comfortable as possible.
Okay.
Could I add?
Sure, go ahead.
As well, we, as Mr. Scott was saying, we will met with the disability unit and other concerns. Presently, none of our vehicles are equipped, right, with access to for the disabled persons. And we sometimes hear that sometimes they pay over $200 a day to be transported. So we will continue discussions with the disability unit and persons. We also will be speaking to our stakeholders to see if we can get specialized routes that will have direct access to the persons with disability. So rest assured, we are in discussions. We have also observed that a number of our bus stops does not have is not properly equipped or have access to persons with disability and aging, and particularly older persons when they climbing on when they're stepping on those buses, they tend to have some issues because some of them may have suffered from problems with their knees and so. So we are in discussions with the Ministry of People's Empowerment, the disability unit, and rest assured that when our buses come here, it will be equipped, and we will be providing buses on specialized routes to assist persons with disability.
Okay. Mr. Scott, I want to come back and talk about some money issues. Mr. Raphael said that up to $200,000 can be accessed by each PSV operator from the fund. But tell me, what is the cost for an electric vehicle as you've begun to source them, to look at where you can get them, whether they're from Japan or China, compared to how much they're paying now for diesel vehicles?
Well, a good, well-manufactured bus that would run you the course for a few years in terms of your business model may run you from around 175,000 Barbados dollars up to 400,000. Realistically, it depends on the type of vehicle, just like how you may buy one brand of car, which is a lower end, and then you may have a higher end car. But we have somehow spoken to manufacturers who are willing to do both based on the proposed budget that we are working with.
Can electric vehicles be manufactured in Barbados? And if so, would it be financially feasible?
Yes to both. We have also spoken to some local manufacturers who are willing and have already built bus chassis here in Barbados. So it would just be a matter of retrofitting it with the necessary battery or the compressed natural gas setup to actually run here.
So how many can possibly be manufactured here in a given year, for instance?
Well, I would only imagine that that probably would be the challenge. I'm not into manufacturing, and unfortunately the guest who was supposed to be here couldn't make it. But we believe it would actually be enough as the phase is being transitioned and each individual qualifies for their loan, that they'll be building the buses to coincide with the disbursement of those funds.
Are you saying that we don't then necessarily need to go to Japan or China?
Well, we would love if we can build them here, but realistically, China has taken the lead as it relates to electric vehicles, and we're really trying to ensure that we get the best possible buses, especially in this first phase, but we are more than willing to work with local manufacturers. But the speed to which we're trying to have the first 100 buses out, we will have to definitely outsource.
We have a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead. Good evening.
Hi, good evening to the moderator and to your guest. Well, I only recently joined the program, so I don't know whether this question has been raised. But my question, nevertheless, is directed to Mr. Kelvin Scott. Sir, you're speaking of the transition from fossil fuels to renewable vehicles. I'm wondering, if you take your electric vehicle to a port, and the port itself is supplied or furnished by non-renewable energy, you're still back in the same scenario. So basically, if my point is that unless you can assure us that you will only recharge your vehicles from renewable sources, essentially you're still end up right back in the same fossil fuel debacle. So I have to listen to your response, please. Thank you.
Very interesting point, and as you would appreciate, any electric vehicle, whether it be a bicycle, whether it be a car, whether it be a bus, will still tap into the fossil fuel sector at some point of time, obviously in terms of the charging, but overall what we're looking to achieve, sir, is a reduction. And we appreciate with all of our research that it would never be 100% reduction where fossil fuel is concerned. The overall goal of government, and then by extension the overall goal of the organization, is to reduce the use of fossil fuel. But realistically, we appreciate the fact that we can't reduce it 100%.
Caller, are you still there? Well, on that note, we're going to take a break and come right back with more of the People's Business. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're discussing how the PSV sector public service vehicles that are being operated by private owners are being transitioned from reliance on fossil fuels to renewable energy. And in studio with me tonight is chairman of the Tell me the name of your organization.
Alliance Owners of Public Transport.
Yes, Alliance Owners
Of
Public
Transport, AOPT.
Yes, Alliance Owners of Public Transport. This is the chairman, Mr. Roy Raphael.
Hi.
We have the director in charge of the new transition to this energy project.
TEP.
TEP. It's all new to me, so please forgive me.
That's
TEP.
okay.
And then we have Mr. Banfield. He is responsible for your complaints in
Correct.
this sector, and he also has responsibility for the disabled community. We have a caller on the line. I'm going to take that call. Caller, go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I like the idea that about dealing with the disabled, and I also am for dealing with the disabled and making sure that they can travel on the public service vehicles, specifically ZRs and the minibuses, to be able to accommodate them. However, dealing with Mr. Raphael, who mentioned about the battery's 8-year life, I'm wondering, since that is the case, how will y'all speak to, or deal with rather, the disposal of the batteries? Is there anyone in Barbados who are trained in servicing the electric vehicles, specifically the battery? And how we all we'll go about that. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. We've had discussions with a manufacturer who actually takes back the batteries. So we'll be able to send back the batteries when they are of no use, which I think is very good. That's one of the qualities or one of the advantages that we're looking at right now, because that has been a question that has been plaguing a lot of discussions in government as well as the private sector in terms of what happens to the battery when it is not in operation or use anymore. I think technology is going to advance as the years go by. So the time span also too of battery life is also going to come down. And I think that also the ways to dispose of batteries will also be something that it will get better as time goes by. But we are looking at probably shipping the batteries back out and not leave them here in Barbados to the waste in the dump.
Okay. Now, I had asked you earlier to tell me, Mr. Scott, about the cost of acquiring a new electric vehicle. But I also want you to tell me, how does that compare to acquiring a new diesel bus?
So if we were to do the comparison with a normal 24-seater bus, purchasing a new 24-seater bus, you're looking at like $225,000 or so. So if you are able to acquire an electric bus with the same 24 seats, for example, for between $175,000 and perhaps maybe $215,000, based on the manufacturers we've spoken to, you're actually starting with automatic savings in terms of the startup costs.
Okay. And in terms of being able to now rely on charging these vehicles because they're electric, what savings can owners see? What do you project that they will save?
Well, we have worked out a cost analysis based on perhaps the same savings that an individual would get with a hybrid car, for example. And we are looking at between 40 to 75% in terms of savings. And when we're structuring the overall costs where savings are concerned, we're looking at the savings from charging versus at least between $250 to $350 per day that some operators are using. So that's one form of savings. But then, most importantly, electric vehicles versus fossil fuel vehicles require less maintenance. And that's the long-term savings that we are really looking at in terms of brakes, in terms of shocks. They require less maintenance over a period of time, especially being vehicles that will be worked continuously.
Okay. What training do you have earmarked for drivers of these new vehicles, electric vehicles?
Well, I would prefer if the chairman speak on that topic.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you for that. We're looking at basically at 25 persons in the first instance. We will be putting out an advertisement very shortly to invite persons who want to work with us full-time or part-time. But obviously, like the Transport Board and those other entities that have electric vehicles, you have to be trained. So I believe that we may have to have a discussion with the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute very shortly to see if a program can be put into electric vehicle maintenance. Because, I mean, yes, it's a vehicle, but it's certain things that you need to know about an electric vehicle, so that in event where there's an issue, as the first responder or the driver, you know how to deal with those. And also, we are in discussions with the persons that we're in discussions with as relate to the buying the vehicles, that they will provide training for persons in Barbados so that they can repair the vehicles while they're here.
Okay. You mentioned the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic. Are there any plans to collaborate with the Transport Board?
Yeah, Transport Board is one of our stakeholders. Eventually, we will want to speak with them because they have the largest fleet as related to electric vehicles. Obviously, there are areas in which we will have to work together. For example, like the cashless system, right? We might have to work with them on that, because you can't have two types of cashless system. You have to have one cashless system on board so that the public can benefit. But going forward, yes, we will want to have some discussions with them to find out from them what are the issues that they first face and what we need to do and not need to do going forward, so that when we go to the second stage of the program, that we already have a knowledge.
Okay. Now, we've spoken about phase 1, phase 2 that is supposed to come. When will phase 1 actually kick in? When will it start?
Well, let me say, well, first of all, thanks to Minister Lisa Cummins. She has been working very well with us on this project. A proposal has been sent, and that proposal, we are waiting for Cabinet to finalize that proposal. After the proposal, let me say though that we are working very closely with Fund Access as well in terms of the disbursement of the $3 million. When that proposal has been satisfied by Cabinet, then there will be the disbursement of the funds. So we are just waiting at this point.
Without divulging too much, what are you proposing to Cabinet so that the funds can then come to the organization, come to the stakeholders who are to benefit?
All right. So the Minister of Energy, Lisa Cummins, in our last meeting, she wanted a proposal from the organization in terms of the spending of the money. We were looking into the proof of concept in terms of the present bus that we have, that is an electric bus, just to satisfy the loan requirements, similar to if you were given, let's say, a business projection to any loan facility place to get a loan. So the proposal included some of our manufacturers and other specific requirements that government asks us to meet.
Okay. Mr. Banfield, what are some of the concerns of commuters? You're responsible for complaints. What are you hearing? Whether it be in relation to this topic that we're dealing with here tonight, or anything else that you feel is pressing that you want to address to assure the public?
Well, most of the complaints recently has been lack of buses. And I think the government just brought in 30. For an economy that is growing, for an economy that is modern, unfortunately, transportation is one of the sectors that has been plagued with, I would say, not being able to fulfill the service that, to meet the people's demands. I think the government is actually going ahead and putting things in place to actually kind of solve that problem to a certain extent. But the private sector also has to play their part too. And by extension, I think in the future, I would like to think that the complaints that we're getting now from people not being able to get home on an evening time will come to a reduction as time goes by. And we are trying as an organization to help by bringing in the energy-saving vehicles so that we'll be able to run longer. longer periods of time on the roads so that we can meet the demands of the customers and to make sure that everybody can get home, because it is not a good situation whereby after days work, especially in areas like down Checkout Hall and those are areas where they can't get home on the evening and work. And it's really difficult hearing the complaints coming in on a regular basis where they're just very fed up. So we're doing our best as an organization to make sure that we can meet those demands, and government is also doing their part too. So hopefully together we'll be able to get at least that rectified and going forward and try to solve the major other issues that come in terms of complaints.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to talking to the batteries concerning the electric vehicles. What guarantees do you have so far based on what suppliers are saying to you regarding the battery life?
Well, first let me say that that has been the concern of Barbadians in all aspects of electric vehicles, the battery. And it's a valid concern. We're looking at it from the same vantage point as, let's say, cell phone batteries, meaning technology will improve over time. And our manufacturers are willing to give us between 8 to 10 years warranty on the battery. But the majority of the manufacturers that we've spoken to have indicated that they're willing to do replacement batteries in a very short period of time in the event something should go awry.
Okay.
Could I add
Yes,
something
go
here?
ahead, Mr. Raphael.
Right, so about 30 persons will apply for the loan, the $3 million loan, but we have selected, or we're in process of selecting about 15 persons. Obviously,
Yes.
with $3 million, we could only accommodate 15 persons out of that. What we will do is hopefully, as soon as that matter have resolved itself in terms of us, we were able to start calling those persons for interviews and to prepare them, because it would take about between 3 to 6 months to manufacture a bus. And we're hoping by the end of this year, we should have the first 15 buses ready to hit the road. Right, as I said earlier, disabled friendly, we have already identified some of the routes that we would like to see them on. We also will be approving shortly the color coding of these vehicles, because obviously, whereas in the TAP program, you have all colors vehicle. With the manufacturers, you have to have one color. If you have to have different colors, it's more costly. So we will be in discussions with the stakeholders as early as next week to see what are the colors that they want to see the buses are in. And obviously, we're hoping that it will be a model on the road, because we continue to get issues relating to complaints against public service vehicle drivers and operators. Sometime soon we will address some of those concerns, but hopefully with the new buses coming on board, we should see more persons catching them, we should see more routes, and hopefully everything should be in place within the now and the next 3 months so that we can roll out, start purchasing our buses.
Okay. We're taking a break and coming right back with more of the People's Business. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're discussing public service vehicles transitioning from the use of fossil fuels to renewable energy. And before we went to the break, Mr. Roy Raphael, you said that you already have in mind some of the routes that these new buses will be on. Please tell us.
Well, we recognize that a lot of the routes, particularly the cross-country routes, what we call the ABC routes and the city bypass and the southern route, those are, we are seeing more persons catching those buses on those routes, right? Because traditionally, person would leave and go into Bridgetown. But after 6 o'clock, you have an issue where a person may not able to get any buses. So what we will likely to do is place some of our buses, particularly on the ABC and the Southern Circle, right? So that people can get the experience, and probably countryside as well. But we will be finalizing those routes very shortly, right? But we're hoping with the 15 buses, there are more than 15 routes anyway, but we're hoping that with the 15 buses, a number of our buses will be seen throughout the country.
Okay, so you're aiming to have the first 15 electric buses roll out by year end?
Yes, please.
Then, Mr. Kelvin Scott, what are the plans for the second phase?
I think the second phase is going to be the most interesting phase, first of all, because the second phase allows us to have a broader spectrum in terms of fossil fuel savings. As we mentioned before, the first phase would be strictly electric for the TAP program. Earlier we mentioned that the PSV sector has over 10,000 permits, so the second phase, for example, would be a bit broader. So for example, a man with a hired car, as long as he qualifies for the loan, he may very well want to go the route of, let's say, a compressed natural gas as a form of energy saving. He doesn't have to necessarily stick with an electric car. And that phase is much broader and for everyone to have access to in terms of their specific needs.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what has happened is that some of the public service sector are not 100% on electric vehicles. So we wanted more areas to look into in terms of trying to meet that energy concept. So natural gas, we've also had discussions with NPC. Yeah, in relation
National Petroleum Corporation.
Yeah, in an attempt to see how we can go in the natural gas sort of way. And we've had, I think discussion is still going on, so we're hoping that that can be positive in the future. But some persons, like I said, electric vehicles are something that they are a little hesitant on. So there are other areas that we can look at to hopefully curtail and help in that area.
Why the hesitancy? What are they expressing? What are their concerns?
Well, same thing, the cost of the vehicles.
But we've just established that there are some upfront savings and long-term savings.
But I'm not only talking about public service, I'm talking about the hire cars, like what Mr. Scott had just mentioned. Taxis, for example. So there are different areas that they're not unsure of in relation to the electric vehicles. Yes, there's savings. We do have a person in our remit who has the only electric bus in Barbados, and so in discussions with him, he did mention that there's 40% savings in terms of the fuel consumption. So therefore, that's something that everybody's looking for right now in terms of the cost of savings in fuel. And I think going on the road, we will definitely see some positiveness coming out of that.
Okay. Go ahead.
You would appreciate that there would be a level of concern and perhaps hesitancy with anything that is new in life.
Correct. Yeah.
And therefore, some individuals have been calling us and asking, well, you know, it will seem so strange not going into a gas station anymore. How will we take care of the battery? What about the replacements and stuff? So we've somewhat looked into our educational program as well as an organization in terms of educating individuals on this particular transition.
Okay. Mr. Raphael.
Yes, please.
I'm coming back to you for some more details about how people can access the loan. Well, how do they qualify for the loan? You said about 30 people have shown an interest,
Yes.
and you've selected about 15.
Right.
What is the criteria?
Well, the criteria basically is, well, Fund Access basically is responsible for disbursing your loan. They have their criteria. What we will normally do is ask the persons to contact the Fund Access, and they will give them the criteria and the information. What we will do is that from our end, we will select the persons that are interested, right? And then we will put them on to the Fund Access so that they can get more information.
Okay, so you're saying that the final word actually rests with Fund Access.
Correct.
In terms of who can access this loan, who can qualify for it, who can actually have it.
Correct. They manage the loan.
Yes, so what we're doing as an organization is that we are somewhat working as a third party to forge the relationship between Fund Access and the government and the loan. So for example, as it relates to time management, individuals have been calling us and saying, well, listen, how can we qualify? Based on what we know thus far, we're able to tell them, listen, get your accounts in order. Obviously, the necessary information needed for any loan. But primarily Fund Access will have that final stamp of approval to say, well, yes, we're satisfied with your business model. We're satisfied based on your accounts that you can pay the 10-year loan, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I'm coming back to Mr. Banfield because I really do want to ask about discipline within the PSV sector. We have these really excellent plans to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, get electric vehicles, go into a second phase to maybe adapt vehicles to use other forms of renewable energy. But then what happens in this sector on a day-to-day basis as you provide transportation? How are we going to uplift that?
Yeah, we have a few bad apples in the industry. And I think that there's a way to weed them out of the system eventually. Discipline has been one of the criteria that has plagued this industry for a little while. But not all PSV operators will fit into that category. So we as an organization, we tend to, our members, because we only have control really over our members, we try to make sure that our members are following the rules and regulations and the laws of Barbados. Outside of that, unfortunately, there are some persons that are not our members, which we don't have the control of, which the Transport Authority, who's a regulatory body for the government, is to regulate and enforce whatever measures they deem fit on those persons. It's sad because I've lived in Trinidad for a little while, and I've seen how the public service sector operates in Trinidad, which is totally different from how we operate here. So it shows that things can be done on a wider scale to control the discipline sector in terms of those bad apples and get them out of the system.
Okay. We don't have enough time to develop this aspect of the conversation in terms of what can actually be done. We have sadly run out of time, and now I'm going to ask each one of you to provide your final words. Mr. Roy Raphael, Chairman of Alliance Owners Public Transport.
Right. I want to say basically thanks to the government of Barbados, the minister, both the DPM, Santia Bradshaw and her team, and also Lisa Cummins and her team to assist us, put us in the right area for us to actually start our transitioning. And I want to quickly say that transitioning is not easy, but we will get there.
Okay. Mr. Kelvin Scott, you're the director of the Transport Energy Project. You're in the hot seat.
Apparently. So my last words would be to the owners of the public service vehicle is that things are new. New understandings and developments would come in time, and give it a try. It's the direction that the country is going, but it's also the direction that the world is going in terms of fossil fuel savings.
Attorney at Law, Mr. Banfield, Mr. Craig Banfield.
Yes, ma'am.
You have to keep them in line, and you're also responsible for taking care of some of our most vulnerable as they travel.
I would like the disabled community to know that we have not forgotten them, and we're doing our best to make sure and ensure that transportation is going to be a little bit easier for them to get around Barbados, the roads of Barbados. And we're looking out for them and guaranteed that we're going to bring some buses that will help assist and aid them in their daily routine.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, viewers, for joining for the People's Business tonight as we discussed how PSVs will be transitioning from the use of fossil fuels to renewable energy. I'm Stacey Russell on behalf of the head of our News and Current Affairs Department, Mr. Kent Jerson, and our crew. Thank you for viewing. See you again soon for another episode of The People's Business. Your business.